The galaxy was never truly at peace. Empires held treaties, alliances, and fragile bonds, but under every agreement was fear. Fleets stayed armed, soldiers stayed ready, and weapons were always pointed at one another, waiting for the day the balance broke. That day almost came when strange signals appeared at the edge of mapped space. At first, the signals were faint, like a whisper carried on cosmic winds, but soon they grew sharper, structured, and unlike anything the monitoring stations had ever recorded. The Council of Species, a circle of the greatest empires, was called to urgent meeting. In their massive chamber, voices rose, some worried, some arrogant. The Dravians claimed it was an old probe, a relic from a forgotten war. The Kelthar insisted it was new technology, perhaps from a hidden empire rising in the shadows. But deep down, none of them knew, and that was what frightened them most. For weeks, ships traced the signal, following it into a sector of dead stars, a silent graveyard of worlds no one claimed. Then, without warning, space itself bent open, and from that tier came a warship. It was like nothing they had ever seen. Its hull was not polished with bright colors or sacred markings like alien fleets, but a dark steel, black and gray, designed for function rather than beauty. Its sheer size dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever built. The largest dreadnought of the Council looked like a child's toy beside it. The Council fleets froze, and so did their commanders. Across star systems, entire populations stopped as live transmissions revealed the colossal ship. Silence gripped every planet. Everyone thought the same thought: if such a thing exists, then who built it and what do they want? Whispers spread fast. Some called it a Titan, a fitting name for something that seemed more like a moving world than a ship. Others feared it was a doomsday vessel, sent to erase civilizations. But when the first brave commander sent a hail, no reply came. When another tried to scan it, the ship released a pulse that shut down their systems, leaving their fleet drifting helpless. The Titan did not fire, it did not move closer, it simply hovered watching. The Council ships kept their distance, surrounding it like wolves circling a silent giant. Every sensor pointed, every weapon charged, but no one dared to strike. Inside the Council chamber, panic boiled. Some demanded immediate attack, fearing that waiting would only give the unknown enemy an advantage. Others argued that striking first might unleash destruction none could stop. 1,000 years of rivalry vanished in a single moment as fear bound them all together. For the first time in history, every empire shared the same thought. The future of the galaxy rested on the choice they made against a single warship. But still no decision came. Because they could not read it, they could not understand it, and deep down they were afraid of waking whatever slept inside that steel monster. Days turned into weeks. The Titan drifted in silence, its engines glowing faint but steady like the breath of something alive. Alien fleets remained stationed around it, never leaving but never daring to act. Messages were sent every day in every known language, in signals of light, in songs, even in mathematical codes, but nothing came back. Some began to believe the ship was unmanned, a ghost from another time or a relic from gods, yet sensors confirmed faint energy deep inside. Energy unlike any they had ever recorded. It was not plasma, not fusion, not antimatter. It was something beyond them. Scientists stared at their readings in disbelief, unable to explain what kind of mind could create such power. Rumors began to spread through the galaxy. Civilian worlds whispered that a new empire had risen in secret, building strength in hidden corners of the stars. Smugglers and traders swore they had heard stories of a race long ignored, quiet and small but stubborn and fierce. Some even dared to say the word humanity. To most, it was only a name in forgotten records, a minor species that had never joined the Council, a people dismissed as too new and too reckless to matter. And yet here, standing in the cold void, was proof that they had not only survived but risen beyond imagination. The realization hit like ice across every heart. Humanity had built this Titan, and they had returned. The silence of the ship was more terrifying than any threat. Had it come to demand or to destroy or to judge? Entire worlds waited, frozen in suspense. Armies were moved into position, defenses raised across colonies, and the Council stayed locked in endless debate. But nothing changed. The Titan remained still, a silent shadow against the stars, and the galaxy trembled under its presence. It was not war yet, it was not peace either. It was something worse. It was anticipation, heavy and suffocating, pressing on every living being. Every alien eye turned toward that single ship, waiting for it to move, waiting for it to speak. Days felt like centuries. Fleets that once feared nothing now stood in perfect stillness. No one wanted to be the one to fire the first shot, because they knew that if they did, the galaxy itself might burn. The Titan stayed quiet, engines humming like a heartbeat, patient, unshaken, unstoppable. It was not in a hurry, and that patience frightened the Empires more than any weapon, for in its silence they felt a truth they could not escape. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Titan hung in the dark sea of stars like an ancient predator resting after a long hunt. Its engines gave off a slow, steady glow, its surface lined with black metal that absorbed the light of distant suns. Around it, fleets belonging to rival empires kept their distance. They floated there day after day, weapons charged, shields raised, but not a single commander dared to fire. The warship had answered no hails, returned no signals, and made no threats. It simply waited. That patience was worse than any battle, for the galaxy was not used to waiting in fear. Whispers began to spread beyond the council chambers and into the streets of the Empire worlds. On distant colonies, children asked their parents what the shadow in the sky meant. Traders who carried messages between stars told stories that changed with every retelling. Some claimed the Titan was unmanned, a drifting machine sent by gods of old. Others swore there were beings inside it, cold and merciless, watching every fleet and every planet, learning their weaknesses before a final strike. The uncertainty was unbearable. No empire liked silence, and this silence felt heavier than war. In the council chamber itself, leaders met daily, their voices sharp and tired. The Dravians demanded action. Their admiral claimed that the longer they waited, the more dangerous the unknown ship became. The Kelthar objected. They believed the Titan had already shown restraint by not attacking when surrounded, and any rash move would provoke destruction. Other empires argued over power, over pride, over fear, but none dared to make a final choice. At night, when the chambers emptied and only shadows remained, even the strongest leaders confessed to themselves that they were terrified. Scientists were ordered to study the strange readings from the ship. The energy signature baffled them. It was not fusion, not antimatter, not any of the known forces that powered galactic fleets. It was something deeper, something raw, controlled with perfect precision. Entire labs argued for days and still came up with nothing but guesses. What shook them most was that the ship's core seemed to be running at only a fraction of its capacity. If this was the Titan holding back, then the true power hidden inside was beyond imagination. While the council debated, the fleets outside grew restless. Crews lived in constant tension, eating their rations with eyes always on their screens, sleeping with weapons primed. Smaller scout ships tried to approach, sending cautious probes to scan the warship more closely. The moment they crossed an invisible line, the Titan released another pulse. It was not violent, not destructive, but precise. Every approaching system went dark, their ships drifting lifeless, and then just as suddenly their power returned. No words, no warning, only silence after silence. The fleets pulled back, shaken by the quiet show of control. Civilian worlds grew louder in their fear. Riots broke out on colonies that feared they would be the first to fall. Religious orders called the Titan a judgment, a punishment sent to humble the proud empires. In hidden corners of the galaxy, rebels and outcasts whispered with strange excitement, wondering if this ship was a sign that a new force had come to break the old order. The council tried to suppress these stories, but they spread faster than light. Everyone knew something had arrived that no one understood. Meanwhile, in the Titan itself, nothing was seen, nothing was heard. No window, no voice, no face of the beings who had built it. The silence drove the galaxy to madness. The longer it lasted, the more unbearable it became. The Dravians once again pushed for an attack. They claimed the ship's inaction was proof of weakness, that it was nothing but a bluff. But when one of their smaller commanders tested that theory, firing a single beam at the Titan, the result silenced even their arrogance. The shot disappeared in mid-space, absorbed into nothing as if reality itself had swallowed it. The Titan did not move, did not return fire. It simply let the shot vanish, and the fleet that fired it was left trembling. That act broke something deep in the council. For if their strongest weapons could be swallowed so easily, then what chance did they have if the Titan ever chose to answer? Days passed, each one longer than the last, each one filled with hesitation. Generals sharpened their strategies but never dared to use them. Diplomats wrote endless messages that vanished into the void without reply. The Titan did not bend to their patterns. It was not playing their game. It was something beyond them. The silence spread like an infection, reaching into every level of society. Soldiers spoke in whispers on their ships. Citizens dreamed of the dark shape blotting out stars. Leaders lost sleep, their decisions crumbling under weight of the unknown. The galaxy had lived for centuries with wars and rivalries, but this was different. Wars had noise, wars had fire, wars had enemies who shouted and threatened. This had nothing. It had a silence that pressed like iron on the chest, a silence that promised something yet unrevealed. And in that silence the name of humanity returned. At first it was only in old archives, dusty records of a young species dismissed long ago. But the rumors would not die. Traders spoke of human colonies hidden in the forgotten arms of space. Some said humans had never vanished, only hidden, building in silence while the galaxy ignored them. And now perhaps they had stepped forward with the Titan, choosing this moment to reveal themselves. The thought spread like wildfire. If this ship was theirs, then humanity had grown in the shadows into something greater than anyone had guessed. The council tried to hold order, but the truth was written across every face, spoken in every trembling word. They were not in control. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the Titan to finally break its silence. Whether it spoke, whether it struck, whether it judged, it did not matter. Every world knew the same truth. Its silence would not last forever. And when it ended, nothing would remain the same. The galaxy waited as if time itself had slowed. Every empire, every fleet, every colony held its breath, staring into the void at the silent shape of the Titan. Weeks had passed since its arrival, weeks of tension so heavy it suffocated even the bravest commanders. The ship had answered nothing, moved nowhere, but its stillness carried weight. Leaders argued until their voices grew hoarse, but no decision ever came. Armies sharpened their weapons, but no shot was fired again. People prayed, rioted, or whispered to one another that maybe this was the end of everything. Yet in all that time, the warship remained unchanged, like a shadow against the stars. And then, without warning, the silence broke. The voice did not come through speakers, did not come through comms. It did not arrive as sound at all. Instead, it was everywhere at once, slipping directly into the minds of every being across the council fleets. For some, it felt like a deep vibration inside the bones. For others, like a heavy wind pressing into the chest. It was calm, unshaken, and impossibly vast. The words it spoke were simple, and they burned into memory. We are humanity. We are returned. The fleets froze. Crews stared at one another, eyes wide, unable to believe what they had just felt. Across star systems, entire populations went still. The council chamber, usually filled with endless noise, fell into silence as the words echoed inside every mind. Humanity. A name thought forgotten, a race thought irrelevant. In the past, they had been dismissed as reckless, too young to matter in the politics of great empires. Some had even believed they were extinct, consumed by their own wars or lost to the dangers of uncharted space. Yet here was proof undeniable and clear. They had not died. They had not disappeared. They had grown, the voice continued. It did not beg, it did not threaten, it did not ask for permission. We come not as conquerors, we come not as servants. We come as reminder. Strength remains. The words carried a gravity that crushed arguments before they could form. The Dravians, who had demanded immediate war, sat in silence, unable to answer. The Kelthar, who had believed the Titan to be a drifting relic, felt the weight of their mistake. The other empires shifted uneasily, each of them realizing the truth. Humanity had chosen this silence, and they had broken it only when the time was right. Some of the fleets panicked. Smaller commanders ordered probes to scan the Titan again, desperate for more information. But the moment their signals touched its hull, they vanished, swallowed as if the data had never existed. A few reckless ships tried to test the Titan's patience further. They moved close, shining bright beams of energy at its surface, measuring the way its armor reflected light. The response was instant and terrifying. The Titan's massive hull flared with invisible force, and the ships disappeared. Not destroyed, not broken into pieces, but gone, erased as though plucked from reality. The crews of other fleets stared in horror. No trace of wreckage remained, only empty space where the vessels had been. Yet even after such a display, the Titan did not press forward. The voice returned once more, steady and cold. We have shown restraint. Do not mistake it for weakness. Those words cut sharper than any blade. They were not shouted, they were not filled with arrogance, they were spoken as fact. Every commander who heard them knew it to be true. The Titan had the power to erase fleets, yet it had not chosen war. That meant it was not here to conquer blindly, but for something else, something more deliberate. and that mystery unsettled the galaxy more than outright violence would have. In the council chambers, panic returned in new form. Leaders argued not about whether to attack, but how to respond to this declaration. Some demanded to open negotiations, desperate to learn what humanity wanted. Others feared that even speaking might reveal weakness. A few whispered that the galaxy should bow before this power, before it was too late. None of them agreed, and the weight of the decision only grew heavier. For every passing moment, the balance of fear shifted further toward the Titan. On civilian worlds, the voice had a different effect. Ordinary beings who had never known war felt awe as much as terror. To them, humanity sounded like something ancient, something fierce, something that would not be moved. On distant colonies, songs began to spread, songs of the Titan sung in voices both fearful and admiring. In secret places, rebels and broken people found hope, whispering that maybe this new force would shatter the grip of cruel empires. Humanity's words meant different things to different ears, but to all they meant change. The fleets around the Titan no longer dared to move. Their commanders stood in silence, waiting for the ship to act again. The Titan hovered motionless, weapons dark, engines steady, as if it had already said enough. And maybe it had, for those words echoed endlessly across the galaxy, stirring unrest and fear. Humanity was not begging for a seat at the table. They were not knocking at the door of the council. They had arrived without asking, and they had made the galaxy listen. The silence that followed was no longer empty. It was filled with dread, filled with questions that could not be answered. Who were the humans now? What had they built in the shadows while the empires dismissed them? How many Titans waited beyond the edge of known space? The unknown weighed heavier than the visible. And though the Titan remained still, its first voice had already changed the galaxy. The council leaders, once proud and sure of their power, sat uneasy in their seats, staring at one another with the same thought unspoken. If this was only the beginning, if this was only the first voice, then what would come next? The Titan drifted in the dark sea of stars as the words of humanity still echoed in every mind. Across the galaxy, leaders repeated them in hushed voices. Civilians whispered them in fear, and commanders carried them like a weight in their chest. We are humanity. We are returned. We come not as conquerors, not as servants, but as reminder. The message shook centuries of arrogance from every empire. But it also planted a deeper fear, one that could not be silenced by debates. If humanity truly possessed the strength their ship displayed, then what chance did the galaxy have to resist if they chose to strike? The council met again, but this time their arguments were different. The Dravians pounded their fists on the chamber table, demanding proof. They refused to bow to a voice in a shadow. They wanted to see the Titan tested, to learn whether its power was real or a careful trick. The Kelthar, wiser and more cautious, warned that pushing against the Titan was madness. They spoke of the ships that had vanished when they dared to draw too close. Yet their words could not still the storm of fear inside the chamber. Fear makes enemies reckless, and the galaxy was full of fear. So a decision was made, not in one voice, but in fragments of pride and arrogance. A fleet was gathered, not of scouts and escorts, but of dreadnoughts, the largest and most powerful warships the council could muster. 30 in number, armed with the most advanced weapons of every empire, their hulls painted in the colors of their peoples. The fleet was sent not to destroy but to challenge, to test, to push the Titan into revealing its limits. They approached with engines burning bright, their lines sharp against the blackness, each commander holding back his own terror with anger. The Titan did not move. It did not open fire, it did not retreat. It hung there, patient and unshaken, like a mountain before a storm. The dreadnoughts spread into formation, circling at a cautious distance. Their weapons glowed with charged energy, every cannon locked onto the dark hull. The order was given. Do not destroy. Disable if possible. Show the galaxy that this shadow is not beyond our reach. And so, with tension stretching across every ship, they unleashed their first strike. Beams of light brighter than suns crossed the void, slamming into the Titan with enough power to split moons. Explosions rolled across its hull, flashes that would have torn any known vessel into burning fragments. For a brief moment, the fleets dared to believe they had scored a wound. The light faded, the shockwaves dissolved, and then silence returned. The Titan remained untouched. Not a single scar marked its surface. The dreadnought crews stared in disbelief. their weapons still glowing but their courage fading. The Titan's voice returned, cold and steady. "We warned you. Restraint is not weakness," and then it moved. Not with sudden violence, but with terrifying precision. From its vast hull, waves of energy swept outward. Not fire, not missiles, not destruction, but something unseen that bent the void itself. The 30 dreadnoughts convulsed as systems flickered and died. Shields collapsed as if ripped apart by invisible hands. Cannons fell silent, their power drained into nothing. Engines sputtered, their mighty cores reduced to silence. In a single moment, the greatest fleet the galaxy had assembled was made powerless. Not destroyed, not slaughtered, but humbled. The dreadnoughts drifted helplessly around the Titan, their crews panicked, voices rising in fear as their ships became lifeless shells. Yet still the Titan did not finish them. Its weapons remained dark, its hull unmoved. Only the voice filled the silence once again. "Your power has been measured. You are found wanting." Those words broke through every mind, carrying a weight heavier than any blast of fire. It was not a boast. It was a judgment. In the council chamber, the leaders who had demanded this test felt the shame of their choice. The proof they sought had been given, and it had destroyed the last fragments of doubt. The Titan was beyond them. Its creator's humanity were beyond them. The thought crushed their pride and left only silence. Across the galaxy, billions watched the broadcast of the battle, their eyes wide as the dreadnoughts floated helplessly. For the first time in living memory, the great empires appeared small. The Titan had done this with ease, and it had chosen mercy. That mercy frightened them most of all. The dreadnought crews reported what they felt as their ships died. They described a force like gravity, a pressure that touched every circuit, every weapon, every system, and bent it into stillness. They said it felt like hands reaching into the heart of their ships and closing tight, not to kill but to remind them that life was held in another's grasp. No technology they knew, no shield or weapon could explain it. Scientists watched the readings and fell silent, their minds unable to shape what they had witnessed, and then, as suddenly as it began, the Titan released them. One by one, the dreadnoughts flickered back to life. Shields returned, weapons hummed, engines burned again. The crews gasped as their ships obeyed once more. Yet none of them moved. Not one dared to strike again. The Titan had disabled them without effort, and it had given them back their power as if granting a gift. The fleets retreated in silence, their pride shattered, their commanders unable to meet the eyes of their own soldiers. The Titan's engines flared faintly, but it remained in place, watching. The message was clear. It could have destroyed them, but it had chosen not to. The Council understood. The galaxy understood. Humanity was not here to beg, not here to bow, and not here to be ignored. They were here to remind all of what true power meant, and that truth settled into every heart like ice. For centuries, the galaxy had believed it knew strength. Now it knew how small it had always been. The dreadnoughts drifted away, their engines burning faintly as they limped back into formation. The test was over, and the galaxy had its answer. The Titan had stood against the finest fleet ever gathered by the Council, and it had not broken a sweat. It had not fired a single missile, had not unleashed endless barrages of fire. It had simply reached out with power beyond comprehension and taken everything from them, leaving them helpless in the dark. And then it had given it all back. That act alone shook every heart deeper than destruction ever could. In the council chamber, silence stretched heavy across the hall. No one dared to claim victory. No one dared to speak of resistance. For the first time in centuries, leaders of empires who once believed themselves gods among the stars sat like frightened children. They had seen proof that their fleets were toys. They had watched their pride stripped bare. The Dravians, who once demanded war, looked down at their hands, unable to meet the eyes of their rivals. The Kelthar, who had warned of patience, spoke no word of triumph, for even they knew the truth was greater than they had guessed. The Titan spoke again, its voice echoing not only in the minds of those who commanded fleets, but across every world, every colony, every station. It did not shout. It did not roar. It spoke calm and steady, the way mountains might speak if they had tongues. We are humanity. We are not your enemy. We are not your servant. We are the shadow you ignored, the fire you thought extinguished. We endured when you dismissed us. We built when you laughed. We return not to conquer but to remind. Survival is not given. Survival is earned. Billions listened and billions trembled. Some wept. Some clenched their fists. Some fell to their knees. The words carried no threat, yet they carried a weight greater than war. They were not a demand for surrender. They were not a plea for peace. They were a declaration that humanity existed and that they stood apart. The galaxy was forced to listen, for the Titan had made itself undeniable. On the outer colonies of forgotten empires, whispers turned to fire. Oppressed people lifted their eyes to the stars and spoke the name of humanity with reverence. They did not see a monster in the Titan. They saw proof that the Council was not eternal, that power could shift, that change could come. In the palaces of the great rulers, that hope was more terrifying than the Titan's weapons. Empires were not only shaken by fear, but by the possibility that their people might look to humanity as something greater. The Council struggled to answer. What could they say to a power that had proven itself untouchable? Diplomats drafted speeches filled with careful words, but each one seemed hollow, meaningless in the shadow of what the Titan had done. Some called for negotiation, some for caution, but none could decide how to face a species that had rewritten the very meaning of strength. The galaxy had lived by balance, by treaties, by the dance of rivalries, but balance meant nothing when one stood so far above the rest. The fleets that had witnessed the test returned home, but their soldiers returned changed. They spoke of the feeling of helplessness, of being crushed without fire, of knowing that death could have come but was denied. They carried that story to their worlds, and those stories grew into something larger. Songs were written, prayers were whispered, and in every tale the Titan loomed like a god of war that had chosen mercy. Fear spread, but so did awe. Humanity had not only shown strength, they had shown control, and that control unsettled the galaxy more than violence could have. The Titan did not move closer. It did not invade. It did not demand tribute or bowing heads. It simply remained where it was, its engines steady, its hull dark, its presence vast. The stillness was worse than any battle. The empires began to ask themselves questions they could not bear to answer. How many Titans existed? Was this the only one? Or were there others waiting beyond the veil of uncharted space? If humanity could build this, then what else had they created in their silence? Days turned into weeks once more, but the weight of fear had shifted into something deeper. It was not only fear of destruction now, it was fear of truth. The truth that the galaxy was no longer ruled by the empires of old, no longer balanced on the edge of their fragile treaties. The truth that all their power meant nothing compared to what one hidden species had built in the shadows. Humanity had reminded them what survival meant, and the reminder was carved into every mind. The Titan's voice spoke one final time, calm and unshakable. We do not come to ask. We do not come to kneel. We do not come to be measured by your laws. We come to remind you that the galaxy is vast and you are not its masters. Remember this, forget it, and you will not survive the storms to come. And then the voice fell silent once more. The ship remained, but it spoke no further. Its silence carried the weight of its truth. The council froze, their debates strangled before they began. The empires stood still, their fleets unwilling to move. The people of the galaxy whispered of humanity as if speaking of an ancient force returned from legend. The truth was no longer a question. The truth was unshakable. Humanity had arrived, and nothing, no empire, no fleet, no council would ever rule the same again.